Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Journey to Thrive podcast here at St. John Vianney Center. I'm your host, Deacon Jim Friend. Today, I'm joined by my brother, Deacon Dan Giblin, to talk about a relatively new initiative here at St. John Vianney Center. It's an Alcoholic Anonymous group called Grace and Gratitude. And this group is specifically designed for clergy and religious, and it offers a safe and faith-filled space for support, healing, and community. In our conversation today, you'll hear how this group began, why it's so important, and how grace and gratitude are central not only to recovery, but to living out our vocations with joy. Welcome, Deacon Dan.
Well, thanks, Deacon Jim. Good to see you.
Great to see you too. Great to see you too. So, Deacon Dan, maybe we could get started first by sharing a little bit with our listeners about your own background.
Sure. I'm a deacon in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, as you know. I was ordained in 2011 by Cardinal Justin Regali. And then I was assigned to my home parish, which is still my parish and assignment today, St. Anne's. I've had two wonderful, understanding pastors over my time that allow me to go out and do the work that I want to do, that is part of my vocation, that is not part of the parish. So I've had a wonderful parish experience. And I've been in recovery myself personally from alcohol for 41 years. And been very active in recovery and 12-step movement since coming in 1984. And one little story I always like to tell of knowing that this was part of my, I think God's plan for me all along was when I was in 7th grade, I went to a vocation retreat up to the Friars of the Atonement in Garrison, New York. And that was a place that would be a big part of my life. I would find out much later on in sobriety. But at that time, I came away. I was very impressed with the friars and the work that they did on the mountain at St. Christopher's Inn, which was a facility for those with addictions that they could stay for free for a month and enter sobriety. And I remember coming back and telling my mom, Mom, I think I'd like to be a priest and work with alcoholics. So looking back now, many years, I see that God, I guess it's an example of watch what you pray for. God did answer my prayer, but in a very different way, where I was not going to be a priest. I was going to be a deacon. And he was going to allow me to work with alcoholics, but he was going to give me a very intensive on-the-job training program first by allowing me to live that life and experience it, and then be able to pass on his solution from a unique perspective. So today, my sobriety in life, I'm retired from St. John Vianney. I was a spiritual care advisor at St. John's for about 6 years. I had the privilege of working with all the residents at St. John's. Worked quite a bit with the addictions group at St. John's. And that came after a long career in the corporate world in the last 20 years being at IBM. But I saw as I came closer to retirement that it was an opportunity to take all of my life, the good and the bad, and combine it together and then channel it in a specific direction. And St. John's was a big aid in allowing me to focus in that direction. And now I can continue on today, even though I've retired from full-time work at St. John's, and continuing that work.
That's tremendous. What a tremendous story. Congratulations on your 41 years of recovery, and in a special way, thank you for the way that you've turned that into such a tremendous ministry and helped so many others through your recovery and through sharing your experience. It's incredible. Speaking of that, Deacon Dan, tell us a little bit about how the Grace and Gratitude group began here at the St. John Vianney Center.
Well, like everything, it's got a story. And I was always the biggest cheerleader for our involvement and attendance at 12-step meetings because I knew the value of them. And I knew that from being in recovery and working with people for many decades, that in the beginning, there was a lot of intense work with therapy and with doctors and with counselors. And And there was a lot of focus on the individual. But over time, that focus is kind of lost because the drama of the situation kind of decreases. And you don't have as many resources that are directly working with you, and you enter into a sort of normalcy in life, dealing with whatever your addiction is, and into sobriety. Unfortunately, that can sometimes lead to complacency, and without that whole team of professionals around you, the big lie can come back to somebody's life that, maybe to be different this time. Maybe I could pick up that drink or go pick up that drug or place that bet. Maybe it'll be different after all these years. I know that it is different, but it's much worse than it was before. And the one consistent that's necessary for both internal conversion that we're called to in our faith and in our sobriety is the activity in the program, which the spirituality of it is this constant call for conversion. So when COVID hit a few years ago, there was an opportunity to utilize technology and to replace all of our outgoing meetings with groups that would come and volunteer via Zoom. So we established a good relationship with the local group, and they became, our steady meeting. That created our relationship with Zoom. COVID went away, and we resumed our regular attendance at meetings. But the thought always came to me, and it was based really on something that our president, David Schellenberger, said at an employee meeting once. He said he envisioned St. John Vianney as being a resource for the church. And that phrase just stuck with me, maybe from the corporate world or from where it was, but I saw that resource as being very valuable and being very accurate of what St. John's can and does do, besides its services for the inpatient and outpatient and consultation and education and everything else we do. We could be a resource for a particular need. And that was to be a need to provide this very valuable 12-step community experience to clergy, who, as with every group, has its own form of denial, that I wasn't that bad, or I don't want to go in there because they know I'm a priest, sister, bishop, whatever it is. And everybody goes through that. Everybody thinks they weren't that bad. Everybody thinks, I can't go in there, somebody might see me. So there's a natural stigma and denial that we break through. But that's most easily accomplished when you can introduce somebody into a group of that is very much like them. So a group for clergy would accomplish that. The same thing exists for in all professions. There are groups for pilots, there are groups for doctors and nurses, and they call them special interest groups. But the value is that there's a level of comfort and instant acceptance, if you will, because everybody in the room understands you. Everybody knows what the challenges of a doctor, and we're walking into a meeting for clergy. Everybody understands the life of, a diocesan priest or a member of a religious order. They don't have to explain community life. They don't have to explain celibacy. Sure. Everybody knows it, and that's the great value.
Yeah. And I'm sure the sooner they feel comfortable in the group, the sooner they can get to the recovery piece, I would imagine. That takes the temperature down a little bit and makes people feel at home a little faster, similar to, the environment that we try to provide here on campus here at the center. When we have a new resident, we want everybody to feel at home and accepted and cared for.
Right. And most of the people we've had so far have already been in recovery many for quite a long time. But they still make the observation that they're experiencing a level of comfort that they hadn't experienced before, even though they go on other Zoom meetings for religious, or they attend meetings in person. There's just this level of comfort of being surrounded by folks that really get you, really understand your life, and really understand the challenges and the reality of it. They don't tend to over spiritualize. That they know this is a physical disease and mental, issue, and it needs that attention, or else it will reoccur. So, and we have had newcomers come to us as well, and their appreciation for the meeting is the same. Is
Yeah.
that, again, I'm home with people that really get me.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes perfect sense. What inspired the name Grace and Gratitude? And maybe you can share for our listeners who are not familiar how that is explained within the context of recovery.
Sure, it's a wonderful name, and we selected it as many things are done in recovery groups is by group conscience, if you will, or consensus. We developed a long list of possible names for it, and Grace and Gratitude, I believe, was the best name, and it offers this image of the, if you will, the transaction with God. Of God always makes the first move in our lives,
Right.
and grace is an unearned gift, and certainly sobriety is an unearned gift that comes to us, but it's presented to us, and we can either accept it or not. And so it is through the grace of God, the people initially enter, a world of recovery. But what keeps them there, and what maintains that, that acceptance of the grace? Usually, it's gratitude. It's being conscious of the gift, not taking the gift for granted, and not just having the feeling of gratitude, but the act of gratitude. It's the only place I can pass this experience on to somebody else that's in need of it, is within those rooms. So I can feel grateful all I want, but that doesn't do me as good as being able to express that with others. And I do that certainly in the parish with folks that are in some situation involving family members or themselves in periods of challenge with addiction, and members of the fellowships. And that's the best expression, my way of giving back, our way. So it's the bookends of the start of sobriety, is this grace from God, and the response, if you will, is gratitude.
Absolutely. And part of that gratitude, as I understand, service is an element of recovery and doing service for others. So expressing that gratitude through service and helping the next guy or the next gal who needs that leg up, and hearing them out and being their sponsor and providing that. Does it essentially, the group, I assume, functions very similar to a typical AA group, following the same kind of order per se, or 12 steps, sponsors, all the usual components of an AA group?
Yeah, I try to have the experience of a regular AA group,
Sure.
for them in every way, shape, and form, from the
Hmm.
format to the format was chosen after a month or so by the members of the group. I think it's
Hmm.
always important that the group makes that selection of how they want the meeting to be formatted. And we have rotating leadership of everybody takes a turn every other week, and we read from some of the selected literature of the fellowship, and
Sure.
then people comment on that. So we stick to a strict format. It's an hour long.
Hmm.
There's a phone list that's distributed if folks want to get in touch with each other. After the meeting, they're quite capable of doing that. And when people request sponsors, either that have attended the meeting or maybe just leaving treatment, and make people in the group aware of that, and then they have the ability to volunteer to serve as sponsors for new folks.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, certainly, I think you've described how this really serves the unique needs of priests, religious sisters and brothers. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how spirituality and faith integrate into a recovery program for clergy and religious? And I know you experienced that when you were here with us as a spiritual care advisor, and now you're implementing probably many of the same kinds of concepts or practices, if you will, into this group.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And it is key
Yeah.
to recovery. I always tell people it's not about sitting in a church basement drinking coffee. It is a spiritual set of spiritual exercises that grants that freedom from whatever you have an unhealthy relationship with. And it is definitely a spiritual movement, not a religious.
Mhm.
So I think members in general community are always quick to say that they're spiritual, not religious. And we hear that in the culture sometimes. And I think most people have a hard time defining what spiritual is.
Right.
But they like to say they're spiritual, not religious. But the same challenge is presented to the folks that we have because they are, priests and sisters. They have devoted their lives to the church, and they have all the elements that they would, normally look at to leading a spiritual life. Their addiction certainly has separated from that and diluted that, and has not allowed them to, remain sober or away from their addiction of choice. So there is an element of openness that's required to. This is a spirituality that you have to be open to, that is kind of new, that you're not going to, just pray your way out of this. We can't have temptation to say, hey, look, I'm a priest, I can get out of this, and I'll just double down on my prayer life, and that doesn't work that way.
Right.
And I think it was Richard Rohr, the Franciscan author, said that America's greatest contribution to the world of spirituality was the 12 steps. And it is a life-changing set of spiritual exercises and really a journey out of self and to others. And those that are open to that and open to a new spiritual experience find the change, seamless. Those who don't and kind of resist have a difficult time, because it's about change. That's required, and we must change. There's an old expression that the man I was drank, and the man I was will drink again, which means if I don't change, if I was still the same man I was back in 1984, I would not be sober. We change, and we change as we're called to in the church to constantly called to conversion. Every Ash Wednesday, we receive the ashes and accept the gospel and turn away from sin. And it's a constant turning away from those things that are not healthy for us. That is part of the 12 steps, and it keeps one, grants one the freedom from their substances of their drug of choice, if you will. So it's a wonderful spiritual life. And I think when AA first came around, and there were a lot of Catholics in the early days of AA, just as there are today. It quickly became a question of, will the church kind of agree with this or not? Will this be a problem? And the church never had a problem in looking at it. They always agreed that there was no conflict in the spiritual practices or beliefs and in the movement. And as one bishop phrased it, the only thing you're going to get if a Catholic enters AA is a better Catholic.
Yeah.
And, I think that's true.
Yeah, tremendous. What has been the response like from the clergy and religious who attend?
The response of our regular attendees is wonderful. It's really heartwarming. And surprising just to note that we get about 10 to 15 people a week, which are our steady attendees, and we're about 60% women.
Yeah.
Which was a little surprising. I didn't really have an expectation of who would make up the group, but I think it just highlights the need. There was a greater need for women religious, certainly the older sisters who maybe can't get out to meetings all the time, but still need that experience of a meeting, still need that experience of fellowship to gather together. And just about every week, somebody makes the comment almost in an offhanded way of, thank God this meeting exists. It's the highlight of my week. I just look forward to seeing you all every week. Wow. And so it just goes beyond just it's not the check mark of I attended a meeting this week, but I did meet my friends this week, and I mean these people get me like my community doesn't get me, my
Right.
bishop maybe not get me. It's so the response has been wonderful. It's been heartwarming, and beyond really any expectation that I had.
That's wonderful. Is there a way you could share a story without breaking any confidentiality, of course, that maybe might illustrate the kind of hope and healing that people are experiencing?
Sure. As I mentioned before, one of the challenges of long-term sobriety
Hmm.
is complacency. Again, because of all the drama and all the issues, problems have quote unquote left,
Hmm.
and there's a temptation of maybe I don't need to do that much work in that area of my life.
Right.
So there was a priest who kind of fit that description and had long-term sobriety, was enjoying his ministry, entering the first phases of retirement, and pretty much stopped any activity in recovery. And he always felt the loss of it. He felt there was a need, but it wasn't that great of a need to motivate him to change.
Right.
And I guess his diocese received the notice that St. John sends out at the start of this when we started the meeting, and it caught his eye, and he thought, well, there's a way for me to get back. I'll join in, and he's been a weekly attendee since we started the meeting, which was November of last year.
Wonderful.
And he just shared that it not only satisfied that need, but has encouraged him to come back into fuller activity. That he had a priceless gift that was given to him, which was
Yeah.
his sobriety, and he had a responsibility to try to pass that on to others. And now he is attending meetings in his own community. He's attending more meetings with religious, and he's become fully involved again with recovery, and also the deepening of that part of his spiritual life
Yeah.
that had begun many years ago. So that's one of the best examples I can think of.
That's wonderful. How would someone join the group? A member of the clergy religious? How do they contact you to join?
It's a very simple way. We
Mhm.
have a mailbox set up, which is a Grace and Gratitude group, and I should know the email address, but I don't know it off the top of my head. So
We'll put it in the
maybe
comments of this episode so people can just access it easily. Yeah.
right, that's what I thought.
Sure.
So the email comes to me, and
Uh-huh.
I just do a little check to see that the person is indeed a member of the clergy, and you are where
Sure.
you are. And
Mhm.
then I get in touch with them, have a little brief conversation, and then just send them the link to the Zoom meeting. And they're
Great.
welcome to come as often or as not as they wish. It's just like any group, it's completely up to the person. There are no dues or fees, just like regular 12-step groups go. And St. John's has been generous enough to offer us really the technology on a weekly basis to be able to host this meeting, and also the wonderful service of advertising this. I know there's little cards at every show we go to, every meeting that we give away. We inform people that this exists. So we have come back to fulfill David Schellenberger's desire, which was to become a resource for the church. We're
Yeah.
a great resource in this regard. That you don't have to have any connection with St. John's to participate in this.
Hmm.
It's just open to any member of the clergy, nationwide, really worldwide. Given Zoom, you can dial in from anywhere. So we present that opportunity for you to meet with folks who understand your life, your vocation, your relationship with the Lord, and your need to grow in that, and also don't facilitate you helping break through the stigma of whatever you may be experiencing.
Hmm. And let's say there were a religious or a member of the clergy listening to this podcast. Maybe they're hesitant, to reach out to you, hesitant to join and come to that first meeting. What would you say to encourage them?
Well, a couple of things. First, I think would be to send me an email and just ask for a phone call, and we can talk about it,
Hmm.
and we can talk through what the fears are. Usually, the fears are I might see somebody I know, And we always say to people, why do you think they're there? But that's still a valid fear that people have. And the only way to overcome it is to experience it. And you can tell people all day long that it is you will enjoy this experience. It will become valuable to you. But until you dip your toe in the water, it's just conversation. So we hold privacy, confidentiality, very important. Our phone list is not used for any other purposes. St. John's doesn't have a copy of it. We don't keep track. We don't monitor. We don't. Even though our members are very good Catholics, whenever they're not going to show up for a meeting, they always send me an email and say, "I won't be there tonight."
It's great.
Yeah, they were raised well, but we don't take attendance. Nobody knows you're going to be at the meeting. Nobody asks for your last name, and you'll be among friends. And if this is on your radar screen in one way, shape, or form, somehow I think that's God's way of putting it before you as that example, as that proof of grace. Mm-hmm. Grace is the gift that is offered, not deserved, and all we have to do is accept it. And so hearing about this, maybe hearing this podcast, is an example of that gift being offered. And I would just say, please accept it, and we'll be happy to have you.
Oh, Deacon Dan, I actually think it's the perfect way to end this conversation. It's beautiful, and I'm hoping that somebody who will listen to this podcast who needs to be a part of your group and that it'll reach them. We'll say a prayer for that. But thank you for all you're doing. Again, congratulations on your own journey of recovery, and thank you for the mission and ministry that God put into your heart to share with other people in this really critical ministry.
Oh, well, thank you, Jim. It's great to be back, at least virtually, at St. John's. Hopefully
yes.
We'll be back there in person soon. And, thanks St. John's again on behalf of all the attendees at the meeting for their generosity and their service and just making this possible simply by advertising and simply by making the Zoom platform available to us. But they provide a wonderful service through that generosity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, again, thanks for sharing your story of grace and gratitude and for the hope that it brings to clergy, not only in our area, but really all over the country. And thanks to our listeners for joining us today on Journey to Thrive. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast, Journey to Thrive, on your favorite podcast player and also on YouTube so that you never miss an episode. And be sure to follow St. John Vianney Center on social media for more updates, reflections, and resources that support the health and wellness of our clergy and our religious. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, may God bless you.